Hey everyone, welcome to Mr. Rainy Night. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, get comfy, relax, and let's begin. I wasn't running from anything, or at least that's what I told myself. But truthfully, after everything collapsed, the startup I'd bet my 20s on, the relationship that withered under stress, and the constant pressure of pretending I had things under control, I needed out. Out of the city, out of cell service, out of my own head. So I drove south, into the mountains. It was early October when I wound my way through the narrow back roads of North Carolina, skirting the edges of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The air was already turning cold, and most of the tourists had long gone. What remained was empty space, low fog clinging to the trees, and a silence that felt almost holy. I'd been hiking alone for about a week, pitching my tent wherever I could find a flat spot, boiling water by creeks, watching the stars in places where the sky still looked infinite. The stillness was supposed to help me heal. I wasn't sure if it was working, but I hadn't spoken a word in days, and part of me liked that. Then I found Laughlin's Pass. It wasn't on my original route, just a side trail off Forney Ridge, marked only by a splintered wooden sign half swallowed by vines. Closed. Unmaintained was stenciled in faded red. Most people would have turned around, but I didn't. That morning, I parked on a narrow turnout beside the road, slung a light pack over my shoulders, just the basics: tent, sleeping bag, a day's worth of food, water filter, and started walking. Just one night, I told myself, a quick escape before heading back to real life. The trail was rough. Wet leaves made the ground slick. Fallen logs forced me to climb and crouch. I didn't see anyone, didn't even hear birds, just me and the forest, watching each other. Eventually, after 3 hours, I came to a mossy clearing beside a narrow creek. The trees formed a heavy canopy overhead, letting in only streaks of dying sunlight. The stream trickled between smooth stones, and a blanket of wet leaves dulled every sound. It was perfect. Isolated. Still. I set up camp, soaked my aching feet in the freezing water, then watched the light drain from the sky. I boiled noodles, ate in silence, listened. No wind, no bugs, no birds. The stillness should have felt peaceful, but something about it made the back of my neck itch, like I was being allowed to be here, but only for now. When darkness came, it came fast. My headlamp barely cut through the black. I lay inside the tent, wrapped in my sleeping bag, but sleep wouldn't come. And deep in my chest, I felt it again. That silent, wordless warning I thought I'd left behind. I must have laid there for hours, wrapped in my sleeping bag, eyes wide open in the pitch dark. Every time I closed them, something in my chest clenched, like my body knew something I didn't. It wasn't fear. Not yet. More like a wrongness I couldn't explain. An instinct scratching just beneath the surface. I told myself I was just overtired, that I'd be fine in the morning. But around midnight, something happened that tore that illusion apart. I'd flicked on my headlamp and picked up the book I'd brought, hoping to lull myself into sleep. I barely got through a page when I heard it. A cough. Not an animal sound, not wind or trees. Human, short, sharp, close. It came from somewhere near the trail, maybe 20 or 30 yards behind my tent. My body went cold. I didn't even move. I just listened. The book slipped off my chest without me noticing. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. I sat up slowly, reached for my phone, and turned on its flashlight. My hand was shaking. I hesitated at the zipper for a few seconds before I pulled it open and peeked outside. That's when I saw her. A woman, or something shaped like one, sitting by the edge of the creek. She wasn't facing me. Her back was turned, long black hair falling down her shoulders in tangles, a pale arm resting on her knee. Torn fabric clung to her back, something like a nightgown or maybe a dress. I couldn't be sure. The right side was shredded like it had snagged on 100 branches. She didn't move, didn't react to the light from my phone, even though I was shining it right at her. My throat tightened. I wanted to speak, to ask if she was okay, but I couldn't make a sound. It wasn't just fear, it was something deeper, older. Like every cell in my body was begging me not to say a word. Like if I spoke, it would hear me. And yet, she was there. Real. Solid. A person. Right? I forced myself to look away, scanned the trees for anyone else. Maybe she was part of a group. Maybe someone was hurt. But when I turned back, she was gone. The spot where she'd been was empty. No movement. No splash. No fading footsteps. Just gone. I froze, flashlight darting side to side like it could catch a ghost mid-flight. I looked behind trees, up into the branches, even across the stream. Nothing. That was when the real fear set in. Seeing her was terrifying, but not seeing her anymore. That made my stomach twist in a way I'd never felt before. My skin buzzed with panic. I stepped out of the tent barefoot, the cold mud soaking into my socks. I walked to where she had been, half expecting her to crawl out from the shadows and grab me. But the only thing I found were footprints. Bare. Human. Pressed clearly into the wet dirt by the water's edge. Small, but deep. She'd been there. That much was real. But where the hell did she go? I backed away and scanned the trees again, heart hammering. No eyes, no shadows moving, just me and the sound of the creek, gurgling like nothing had happened. I didn't sleep that night. I sat inside the tent with the headlamp on, clutching the handle of my camp knife, listening to the forest breathe, waiting for the silence to break again. It never did. Not that night. But something had changed. And I knew, deep down, I wasn't alone anymore. After I left Lauchlin's Pass, I promised myself I'd never hike alone again. I kept that promise for about 6 months. The truth is, the forest calls you back, no matter what it shows you. There's something about the silence that I can't stay away from, even after what I saw. Or maybe I just didn't want to believe it, not fully. So when spring came around, I started planning another trip. This time in Maine, the 100-mile wilderness, one of the most isolated stretches of the Appalachian Trail. I'd done parts of it before, but never this segment, never alone. But that's what I did. I told myself I was being smarter now. GPS, updated gear, flare, and a better knife. I parked near an old service road just before dawn, adjusted my pack, and stepped into the woods. Day 1 was quiet. No animals, but the air still held that early spring chill. I didn't see a single person until late afternoon, and even then it was just a distant figure far ahead, moving too fast to catch. When I made camp near a dry creek bed, everything felt fine, uneventful. I boiled water, jotted some notes in my trail journal, and fell asleep before 10. But that silence, the same one from Alberta, it was back. A dead hush. No wind, no insects, just air. Waiting. Still, I slept, at least for that first night. It was on the second day that things started to twist. I broke camp early and headed south on the trail. About an hour in, I spotted boot prints ahead. At first, I didn't think much of them. Maybe someone had passed through the night before, but something felt off. They zigzagged, not like someone on a trail, like someone unsure, stumbling, backtracking. They wandered off into the brush, then circled back. No clear direction. Then I found the candy wrapper. It was bright red, lying right in the middle of the trail. A generic gas station chocolate brand, nothing remarkable. Except it wasn't torn. It was perfectly folded, neat, deliberate, like someone took their time with it. I picked it up, stuffed it into my trash bag, and moved on. But something about it unsettled me, like it was meant to be found. A few miles later, the same boot prints reappeared. Same pattern. Erratic, looping, lost. or pretending to be. By late afternoon, I started checking over my shoulder more often. Then I heard it. Footsteps, real ones. Not birds, not branches, just soft, crunching steps about 30 or 40 feet behind me, up along the ridge. I froze mid-step, breath locked in my chest. And just like that, silence again. I scanned the trees. Nothing. I called out, trying to sound casual. "Hey, anyone out there?" No response, not even an echo. I should have turned back. I should have left. But I kept walking, faster this time. My pulse had begun to match the rhythm of my steps. I didn't stop until dusk. I found a small clearing and pitched my tent as fast as I could. My hands were trembling. Every time the wind moved, I flinched. Before crawling into the tent, I swept the perimeter with my headlamp. 360 degrees, slow and thorough. No tracks, no eye shine, no signs of anyone. But when I turned back to the tent, there was something sitting on my pack. Another candy wrapper, same kind, same red color, same precise fold. I hadn't dropped it. It wasn't there before, I was sure of that. Someone had placed it there, right in the middle of my gear, silently, like a signature or a warning. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up with my back pressed against a tree, the campfire spitting soft orange light across the clearing. The candy wrapper lay on a rock beside me, like it was watching me too. My knife was in my boot, but I kept it in my hand. I told myself it could still be a coincidence. Some hiker, maybe a prankster, someone playing games out here. But deep down, I didn't believe that. Not after Lachlan's pass, not after that woman. This was the same wrong silence, the same way the forest held its breath. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, pacing, slow, deliberate pacing just beyond the reach of the firelight, 20 feet away, maybe less. Step, pause, step, pause. I froze, didn't even breathe. The fire crackled softly, but that was it. No wind, no insects, no distant owls, just footsteps and the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears. Then I heard something else, breathing, heavy, strained, like someone just out of sight was trying to stay quiet and failing. I stood up fast and yelled into the darkness, "I'm armed, don't come closer." The steps stopped, but that was the worst part. There was no sound of retreat, no rustling through the undergrowth, just nothing. Like whoever or whatever it was had simply stopped moving and was still standing there. I didn't sit down again. I didn't turn my back to the trees. I just stood, knife in hand, scanning the dark until the sky began to pale with the first light of dawn. As soon as I could see more than a few feet ahead, I packed everything in record time and bolted. I didn't care about food, pace, the trail. I just moved. I didn't stop until midday. I'd covered miles, lungs burning, legs screaming. Finally, I dropped to a rock beside the trail to catch my breath. My hands were still shaking, and that's when I saw him. A figure, 50 yards back, standing between the trees, perfectly still. He was watching me, scruffy beard, faded clothes that looked a decade old, something heavy hanging from his side. And the moment he realized I saw him, he raised a gun. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just ran. I darted off the trail and down the slope, weaving between trees, branches slicing at my arms. I didn't stop to look back. I didn't stop to breathe. I didn't stop until I saw my car. I slammed the door, locked it, and drove like hell, gravel spitting from the tires as I tore down the service road. I didn't stop until I reached a ranger station an hour later. I told them everything. The pacing, the breathing, the candy wrappers, the man with the gun. They listened politely, took notes, promised to check the area. But I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. Or worse, they did, and didn't know what to do about it. They said sometimes transients live off trail, that it's not uncommon in remote regions, that maybe I'd stumbled into someone's illegal camp. But they didn't get it. This wasn't just one strange encounter. It was part of something bigger, something that doesn't want to be found, but wants you to know it's there. I thought I was alone in what I'd experienced. That night, after filing the report, I drove until I found a cheap motel with flickering lights and no one at the front desk after midnight. I locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and just sat on the edge of the bed for hours, eyes fixed on the candy wrapper I hadn't thrown away. Something about the way it was folded, so careful, so exact, felt more personal than any name could. The next day, I couldn't shake the urge to talk, not to friends, not to the police, to people who might understand. So I posted about it anonymously on a backcountry hiking forum, just a long, rambling post, half venting, half begging for someone to say, "Yeah, me too." And someone did. A woman messaged me directly, said she and her brother had hiked that same stretch 5 years ago. One morning, they found small folded pieces of paper placed just outside their tent, each one with a child's name and a birthday written on it. She said they'd felt watched the entire trip. One night, her brother swore he saw someone crouched low behind a tree, just staring at their fire. They left the next morning and never went back. She never told anyone, not until she saw my story. A few days later, someone else messaged me. A guy said he found a torn baby shoe tied to a tree branch, swinging in the wind like some sick wind chime. Another woman said she'd been followed for 2 days. She never saw who it was, but heard someone walking just behind the ridges, always out of sight. Then came the worst one. A teenager who said he was camping with a friend. In the middle of the night, he heard the sound of a gun being loaded just outside their tent. Click, metal, breathing. They bolted and ran the entire trail out barefoot. He said he's never been back in the woods since. None of these people knew each other, but their stories, they echoed mine in ways too specific to ignore. Different details, same bones, erratic footprints, strange gifts, the feeling of being watched, someone moving through the trees with no intent to be found. I don't know if it's one person out there, or several. I don't even know if what I saw, that woman by the water, was human. But I know I wasn't the first, and I know I won't be the last, because whatever is out there, in those deep, unmarked stretches of trail, it's still watching, still leaving signs, still waiting. And if you're reading this, thinking about your next solo trip into the wild, I'm not going to tell you not to go. I'm just going to ask, when the woods go quiet, will you listen? Summer of 2019. I remember it clearly, though I've spent years trying to forget. My name's Eric Hale, and that August, my girlfriend Natalie and I had planned a long overdue road trip. We were both fresh out of college, exhausted, broke, and craving one last adventure before diving into real life. The original plan was simple: drive from Knoxville, Tennessee, up through Pennsylvania to visit her extended family. But a call from my mom changed all that. My uncle Walter, the man who helped raise me after my father passed, had come down with pneumonia. It wasn't life-threatening, but he was in no shape to care for himself, and he lived alone in a cabin tucked into the foothills near Clay County, Kentucky, right on the edge of the Daniel Boone National Forest, part of the wider Appalachian Range. So we decided to take a detour. Natalie wasn't thrilled. She wasn't exactly a mountain roads and black bears kind of girl, but she agreed, with the promise that we'd make scenic stops along the way. We packed up my beat-up Toyota Sienna and set out early one Saturday morning with snacks, a tent, just in case, and no firm schedule. The first couple of days were great. We stayed at cheap motels, hiked a bit near the New River Gorge, and even caught a sunset that made Natalie gasp. Her phone camera never quite did it justice. For me, it was more than just a vacation. It felt like reconnecting with the land that shaped my childhood. When we crossed into Kentucky, though, something changed. The towns got smaller. The cell service dropped out. The trees closed in. It wasn't creepy exactly, not yet, but the road felt like it was swallowing us the deeper we went. By late evening, we were maybe 30 miles from my uncle's place when we realized we were nearly out of gas. Natalie was dozing in the passenger seat when I nudged her awake and muttered something about needing to find a station. We pulled up an old offline map and spotted a place called Hollow Creek General. It was off a side road I didn't remember ever taking before, marked only by a crooked, unpainted sign. The sun was dipping behind the hills as we turned down the road, gravel crunching beneath the tires. Natalie joked it felt like the start of a horror movie. I laughed, but I didn't disagree. The station was odd. A squat concrete building with a flickering porch light, surrounded by dense woods on all sides. The pumps looked like they hadn't been updated since the 80s, and the only other sign of life was an old dog chained to a porch out back. Still, we needed gas. "I'll pump," I told Natalie. "You stay in the car, lock the doors." She nodded without argument. Something about the place clearly unnerved her. I stepped out into the heavy summer air and began fueling up. The woods around us were silent. No bugs, no wind, just the hum of the pump and the occasional creak of the sign overhead. That's when I first felt it. That weird crawling awareness, like we were being watched. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then a voice came from the trees behind me. Low, calm, male. "Evenin', you lost?" I turned toward the voice, half expecting to see a tired old local, or maybe a hunter coming in from the woods. Instead, I saw a man standing just beyond the edge of the tree line, barely visible in the dim light. He wore a faded flannel shirt and jeans so dirty they looked like they'd been dug out of the ground. His face was weathered, beard unkempt, and there was something off about him. His posture was too still, too rigid, like he hadn't moved in hours and suddenly turned human again just to speak. "We're not lost," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Just needed gas." He didn't respond, just stared at me with this expression I can only describe as blank. Not confused, not angry, just hollow. Something about that silence made the air feel thicker. "Do you live nearby?" I asked, immediately regretting how that sounded. Still nothing. That's when Natalie knocked on the inside of the window, her voice muffled but urgent. I turned. She was pointing, eyes wide, mouthing, "Get in, now!" I looked back at the man. He was gone. I stepped around the pump, scanning the woods. Nothing. No movement, no snapping branches, just empty trees and shadows. I rushed inside the station, trying to hide the tension in my voice as I approached the counter. A wiry man in his 60s stood behind it, flipping through a tattered hunting magazine. He didn't look up. "Hey, do you know if there's someone living near here? Guy in the woods, flannel shirt?" The attendant's hand froze mid-page. He looked up slowly. His eyes met mine, clear, sharp, not tired like I'd expected. "Was he watching from the pines?" he asked. I nodded, suddenly cold. He didn't say another word, just bent down behind the counter and came back up holding a worn-out pump shotgun. He clicked off the safety with the ease of habit and turned toward the front windows. I stood frozen, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who the hell is he?" The man didn't look away from the glass. "Don't know his name, but if you saw him, he's not alone. They come from deeper in the forest, and if he was out that close, it means they're already moving." That was all he said. Nothing else. No explanation. Just that cryptic warning. I paid in silence, heart hammering in my chest, and rushed back to the van. Natalie had locked the doors and was gripping her phone like a weapon. "We're leaving," I told her, starting the engine. "Now!" As we pulled away from the station, headlights cutting through the trees, I glanced in the rearview mirror. No sign of the man. No sign of anyone, just the station's light flickering in the distance, swallowed by the dark. We didn't talk for the first few miles after leaving the gas station. Natalie stared out the window, her fingers clenched tight around the seatbelt. I kept both hands on the wheel, knuckles pale. The sun was gone now, and the Appalachian forest around us looked less like trees and more like looming silhouettes. Silent. watching. Eventually, she broke the silence. Who was that guy? The one in the trees? I didn't know how to answer, so I told her part of the truth. That someone strange had shown up. That the clerk inside the station reacted like he'd seen him before, and didn't like it. What did he say? She asked. I hesitated. He said the man wasn't alone, that they come from deeper in the woods. Natalie's face turned pale. That's not something normal people say. I nodded, unable to argue. We drove for over an hour, trying to put as much distance between us and that station as possible. The road twisted through mountains, sometimes narrowing to one lane. Every now and then, I caught Natalie checking the side mirrors. She wasn't being paranoid. I was doing the same thing. Eventually, exhaustion hit me like a wall. My arms felt like lead and my eyelids were slipping. We hadn't planned on stopping, but I knew I wasn't safe to drive anymore. We found a clearing, not an official campground, just a wide patch of dirt where the forest pulled back a little. There were no houses, no lights, no people for miles. It felt quiet, still, safe enough to rest. I pulled the van to the edge of the clearing, killed the engine, and locked every door. Natalie was still tense, but she eventually curled up in the passenger seat with a blanket. I stayed in the driver's seat, one hand still resting on the steering wheel like I was afraid to let go. Somewhere around 2:45 a.m., I finally nodded off, and at 3:11, I remember the time exactly. Natalie shook me awake. There's something outside, she whispered. My blood went cold. I sat up slowly, straining to hear. At first, nothing. Then, crunch. Footsteps, not one set, multiple. Moving softly over the dry ground, circling the van, Natalie clutched my arm. Eric, they're talking. She was right. There were voices, too quiet to make out clearly, but close, whispering, murmuring. No urgency, just calm, patient tones, as if whoever was out there wasn't in a hurry. And then, the door handle rattled. The rattling stopped for half a second. Then came another one. Different door, back handle this time. I reached between the seats and grabbed the pistol I kept in the center console. Small, legal, loaded more for show than use. But at that moment, it felt like the only thing keeping the dark outside from pouring in. Natalie was frozen, her breath shallow, her hand locked around my arm like a vice. I pulled back the curtain on the side window just a crack and peeked through. They were right there. At least 4 of them, standing in a half circle around the van. I couldn't see faces at first, just silhouettes, motionless, close enough to touch the glass. And that's when I saw more of them. Not just the man from the trees, but a woman too, pale and silent, standing by the driver's side. Her face slack, her lips too pale, but her teeth were visible, smiling in that empty, wrong kind of way. The man's expression hadn't changed since I first saw him. Still blank, still doll-like. His face smeared with dirt, his eyes wide and unblinking. But the woman, there was something deliberate about her, like she knew I was watching, and she wanted me to. And worse, she was gripping the driver's side door handle. I didn't think. I raised the gun and aimed it straight at the window. "Back off!" I shouted, loud and sharp enough to split the air. "I swear to God!" She blinked once, then took a slow, careful step backward. The others followed, like puppets pulled by the same unseen string. No fear, no panic, just deliberate retreat step by step into the shadows between the trees. In less than 10 seconds, they were gone. But the silence they left behind felt heavier than their presence. Natalie jumped into the driver's seat without a word. Tires spun in the dirt and we tore down the road, trees blurring by, both of us shaking. She didn't stop until we reached a highway, not until we saw real streetlights again. When I finally took the wheel back, my hands were still trembling. "They found us," she said, voice flat. "We drove for hours and they still found us." I didn't have an answer, but I knew she was right. We drove until the sun came up. Even then, the trees didn't feel less menacing, just quieter, like they'd said what they needed to say, and now they were waiting again. Eventually, we pulled into a rest stop off Highway 25. Natalie collapsed into the passenger seat, still gripping the blanket like it was a shield. I stepped outside and paced the lot, trying to breathe normally. The world around us looked normal. Early morning trucks, birds chirping, gas station coffee brewing. But it didn't feel normal anymore. I checked the van, the handles, the windows, the doors. No marks, no scratches, no evidence that anyone had ever been there. If not for Natalie, I might have convinced myself I'd imagined it all. We didn't go to my uncle's, didn't finish the trip. We just turned west and drove until the mountains disappeared in the rear view. That night, we stayed at a hotel in Lexington with working locks, bright lights, and a lobby full of people. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I decided to look into the area we'd passed through, just out of curiosity. I expected maybe a story or two, maybe a legend about a hermit, or some obscure local warning. But what I found chilled me. Missing persons reports, dozens of them, scattered over decades. Hikers, drifters, even a few locals, all from the same region of forest. No connections, no bodies found. But a few of the older online forum posts talked about the Watchers, vague references to people seen in the woods who don't speak, don't attack, just observe, until one day they don't. One post mentioned waking up in a tent to find someone standing just outside the fabric, not moving, not speaking, just waiting. Another told of finding handprints on the glass of their car after camping in the area, even though no one had been near it for miles. But what made my blood run cold was a single line in a buried thread. If you see one, there are already more you haven't. Natalie and I don't talk about it much anymore. We're still together, but that trip exists like a scar, one we both feel without needing to describe. We don't go camping now, we don't drive into the deep woods, and we sure as hell don't stop at gas stations where the pump lights flicker. They say the Appalachian Mountains are full of forgotten places. Places where time folds in strange ways, where the trees remember more than people do. I wasn't looking for mystery when I set out. I just needed a break, some solitude, a reset. My name's Eli Green, and last fall, I drove out to a small grove called Pine Ridge, just south of where the Appalachian Trail thins into winding service roads and faded logging paths. I'd camped there before. It was one of those places you only hear about from someone who heard it from someone else. No signs, no rangers, just a clear flat patch beside a creek, framed by old pines and silence. That first day was calm. I set up my tent, gathered some firewood, even found a spot with enough signal to send a still alive text to my sister. By sundown, I had a small fire going, a cup of instant noodles in hand, and the kind of quiet that city dwellers would pay money for. But that night, something changed. I'd just zipped myself into the tent when I heard it. Crunching, soft, rhythmic, like footsteps on fallen pine needles. I held my breath. Could have been a deer, a bear even. I wasn't new to the woods, but then the sound stopped right outside my tent. No breathing, no snuffling, just stillness. I waited. Minutes passed. I finally convinced myself it had just wandered off. The next morning, I stepped outside to find my gear moved. Not stolen, not destroyed, just shifted. My cooking pot was lying in the dirt a few feet from where I'd left it. My backpack had been unzipped, but nothing taken. It was like someone had rummaged through everything and put it back. Almost. A small part of me wanted to pack up and leave, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was wind. Maybe an animal pawed through my stuff. Nothing was missing. I stayed. That night, around 1 a.m., I woke up to a sound I couldn't place. It was a kind of low static hum, like the hiss of an old radio trying to catch a signal. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then it shifted. The hum cut out, replaced by a faint voice. Not words, just sounds, garbled vowels, a wet, crackling breath, then static again. I sat up in my sleeping bag, my skin prickling. Then I saw it. Just outside the tent flap, barely visible in the moonlight, was a small, boxy radio. Not mine. It looked ancient. Rusted corners, knobs half missing, a cracked speaker grill. I hadn't brought a radio. I hadn't seen one around here. And yet, there it was, softly hissing to itself in the dirt. The voice came again, louder now, clearer. "I see you." My chest clenched. That wasn't just some random radio signal. The voice, it sounded like mine. Not quite, but off by a few notes, like someone trying to mimic me and getting just close enough to unsettle. I scrambled backward inside the tent, pulling the zipper shut, heart thudding in my ears. Then, a thud outside, like something heavy had dropped onto the ground just a few feet away. The radio went silent. I didn't sleep. I didn't even move until the sky turned pale and the birds began to chirp again. When I finally unzipped the tent, the radio was gone. I don't know how I managed to keep it together. Maybe I told myself it was a prank. Maybe I didn't want to believe anything else. But that was the last straw. I packed everything in 20 minutes, shoved my sleeping bag into the trunk without rolling it. Didn't eat, didn't drink, just walked the trail back to my truck like something was chasing me. Only, it didn't feel like I was running from something. It felt like I was being guided out. The air had that heavy, waiting quality, like whatever had brought the radio wasn't done yet, just watching, letting me go for now. I didn't stop driving until I hit paved road. I didn't talk about it for weeks, and even now, months later, I keep thinking about that voice, how close it came to my own, like it had been listening to me, learning me, long before I noticed. Sometimes late at night, I think I hear that faint static hum again, just behind the wall, just behind the wind. And once, just once, I thought I heard a whisper behind me while shaving in the mirror. It said, "I'm closer now."